Yeah, I am. I live about an hour north of London in the UK, and yeah, I'm so excited about the record we've done together, The Gathering. It's really unique, and all these guys just played so amazingly on it. It's really for me, it's really more than the sum of its parts, and yeah, it's fantastic. I'm really excited about it, and I'm yeah excited to talk about it. I think that's me.
All right.
Hello, Gary. Gary Husband, and I played. Had the pleasure of playing keyboards. I think, right? It's been a long time since we
And
And
drums.
drums. And drums.
and drums. Yeah, no, unforgettable experience. Um, and we did it all together in Spain, La Casa Marata, and it was a long way away from where I am right now in London. So
Okay.
that's me.
Welcome, Gary, once again to Stalwarts of Music in a different setting altogether. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Asaf, would you like to go next?
Sure. So my name is Asaf Sirkis. I'm talking from you right now from Luton in the UK, where I kind of live basically half of the time I'm here, half of the time in Germany.
Mhm.
And I play drums on Mark's new album, The Gathering.
Okay.
And what else can I say? It was a really, I mean, I have done quite a few things with Mark over the years, over the last, I would say, 7 years or so. Am I right, Mark? I don't know, something like that. Um, and it's always a great experience for me because the stuff that Mark writes and produces and the people, it's just the situation is always very near and dear to my heart because it is quite close in I can say to the vision, the musical vision that I have, the music that I write, and it's one of the only people basically that our worlds are quite close in that sense in the musical language, you could say. And
Okay.
it's so this new album was doubly great experience because of all these people that are sitting here in front of the screens, and so it's been even more exciting and more enjoyable to be part of this musical adventure. Yeah,
Incredible.
that's
Incredible. Mr. Jones?
Uh, Good morning, evening. I'm Percy Jones. I'm in Spanish Harlem in New York City, and I played bass on Mark's record, on some of it, I think 4 tracks, fretless bass. And I remember when I first heard a track, I was like, Jesus, who's this drummer? You know, because I didn't realize there were 2 drummers
Hmm.
playing. I was checking out this, I was trying to figure out some bass parts, and I was listening to the snare drum. I was thinking, holy shit, it's just I didn't know there were 2 drummers, and Mark, subsequently explained that. Um, anyway, it was fun stuff to play on. It was challenging, and
Yeah.
it was a good experience.
Welcome to Stalwarts of Music with Aditya Veera, Season 3. It's such an incredible privilege to have you all on the show. A very different format I'm doing for the very first time. More of a roundtable discussion. It's really thrilling to be talking to people from different parts of the world in one virtual platform. So I'm very excited to be talking to all of you, gentlemen.
Oh, it's a pleasure to see you. Thank you. Thank you.
All right. So I'd like to get started with my agenda for today. So starting with the very title, The Gathering, right? What does it represent and what are you trying to convey through the artwork where a man can be seen wearing a hat, looking at a haunted mansion on a gloomy day? And there's a lot of attention to detail. There's a dragon on top of the house. So what exactly are you trying to convey in terms of this album and this whole idea of the artwork?
Well, yeah, that artwork kind of to me somewhat echoes the Tales from the Dreaming City album I did a couple albums back, where it's kind of imaginary world sort of thing. And I think, I don't know, for me the music is sort of goes into imaginary worlds, at least for me. When I write it, when I listen to it, I mean, some of it's about the here and now, some of it seems to go off into something more, I don't know, alternative universe, whatever it is. And music's like that anyway for me. So I just felt it needed something like a place where something was going on. There's a bit mysterious. You don't really know what it is, but there's something happening in there. And yeah, I worked with an artist who was putting it together, and I had this vague idea, and we just played around until it started to look like something that to me I'd kind of seen in my imagination. And then the man out in front was, it just seemed to need, like, he's turning up to this event and here he is and he's walked up and there's this house, there's obviously stuff going on in there. It looks a bit strange, there's a statue and this dragon and other things, and I'm going to go in there. And it just seemed to feel right. The name, The Gathering, kind of came from the picture. I find it really hard to name tracks and albums. It takes me longer to do that than to write the music. But it just seemed to fit the picture, and it felt right in terms of the sound of the music to me. Yeah, that's it, really.
Okay.
Mhm.
But in terms of a sonic standpoint, why did you decide to go with these set of musicians for this particular album? What did they have to offer uniquely in terms of this record?
Well, Asaf, obviously I've been playing with Asaf for a while, and I knew that Asaf, as Afa said, like our musical worlds are very close, and I knew that it felt to me like he would get the music on a deep level, just know what it meant and play in a way that would really make it happen from that perspective.
Yeah.
Gary and Percy, I've been fans of both of these guys forever. And so having them on the album was just like, and I'd done an album with Gary, another album with Gary, piano and guitar duets called Tor and Veil. So it followed on from that. It was part of the same session. And yeah, Gary's, what can you say? Gary is amazing. He's an amazing pianist, amazing drummer, amazing keyboardist, equally amazing on all of these things. And so, yeah, having him as part of that seemed like a fantastic idea. I just knew that it would bring something really imaginative and interesting and amazing to it. Percy, similarly, Percy's playing is just, to me, it's absolutely unique, one of a kind voice in the world of music, and to have his voice on there to me was just amazing. And I have to say it fit so nicely to me, so perfectly for what was going on, that yeah.
Okay. I'd like to understand from the musicians as to what was, I mean, from what I've gathered, Mark, in terms of his approach, he lets musicians do their thing, right? He doesn't go by the idea of, dictatorship or being a band leader, right? He likes the idea of the session musicians involved doing their own thing in terms of improvisation or whatnot. So with the message conveyed as to what he's looking for in terms of this album, what was your interpretation, your individual interpretations as to the same?
Well, I can't say my memory's very vivid of what order and how we actually track things, except to say that I was really aware of a sort of ensemble sound, very wide and big, and I remember most of all being at the drums with you, Asaf, and I think for clarity reasons, I had my kit on the left and yours on the right, maybe vice versa. But there was some kind of separation there, so I could kind of distinguish what was going on, and you know, because we've also done a lot of projects together and played together in different formations, different circumstances. There was an ease of interaction there. But in terms of the sonic effect and the atmosphere, I should say, it really struck me that there was almost like a kind of like a modern day Miles Davis Bitches Brew kind of vibe. There was a stew, you know, of the various components of players. And I remember the bigness of the way it was kind of unfolding and telling a story, and I just thought it was an awesome, you know, I mean, sessions like that to me, and whoever thought of it and conceptualized it in the first place, it's really magical, because it really, it puts us in a place both familiar and challenging at the same time. So yet extremely comfortable and, you know, kind of otherworldly. So you know, more than many other projects in the past, I've really looked forward to this materializing so I could experience it all again.
Lovely.
That's my.
Yeah, I would also like to add that I think with the way Mark is working with his projects, usually there is sometimes a kind of a direction, sometimes a sense of direction. So, for instance, Mark would tell me, okay, this one is a little bit more gentle, or that one is a bit more rocky, or a bit more hard-hitting, or a bit more whatever. And but not really much more than that. So it's nice to have that freedom to just, you know, just be myself and play and go as far as I want with the material, which makes it a lot of fun for me. With the stuff that we did, let's say with, I think if I remember correctly, with the stuff that we did, me and Gary on drums, there was no direction. So we could go basically anywhere. And like Gary was saying, it was like a sort of a brew. And, you know, when I listened back to it, it's really strange, because I can't even hear myself or Gary. You know, it sounds like sometimes I say, oh yeah, that's snare hit, that's Gary, that's for sure, that's Gary. That's cymbal, that's definitely Gary, because I remember giving Gary a crash or a right cymbal or whatever in the session, because I had some spares and he liked some of my cymbals. So I remember that cymbal. Okay, so that comes definitely from Gary. But it was like we became this one brew of drums, or whatever you can call it, which is really, I think, really special. And then you know, and then Percy comes along and he says, "Who is this drummer?" But obviously it's just two of us, but we don't sound like any of us or like anything else. So it's difficult to explain. But that part of the record, that's part of the project, was completely free and was completely down to us to kind of take a direction of some kind. Yeah.
Okay. Mr. Jones?
Well, I'd approached it initially the same way that I do with any project is um, being a bass player, you're working with bottom end. um, but at the same time, I mean, what you really want to do is support the composition. And if there's any solos, you support the soloist. You know, you're working from the bottom up. That's pretty much applies to everything I think I've worked on. But then you try and make it interesting, you know, with counterpoints or melodic lines or whatever. And it almost always takes a little bit of back and forth. You know, I'll put down a track.
Mm-hmm.
The response will be, you know, it's a little bit busy here and there or whatever. So, you know, you take another run at it. And after some of that, you know, you end up with a good result. And the point you brought up of giving everybody a degree of freedom, I think is really important, because I was thinking of all the stuff I've worked on over the years. I think the best of it has been where whoever I'm working with has given me a degree of freedom. For example, Brian Eno, stuff I did with him years ago, he always gave me plenty of freedom, but then he would give me direction.
Okay.
You know, to keep it on track. And as opposed to a couple of projects I've worked on where I'm so micromanaged, like, you know, do a pickup note there, you know, there's so much direction that you're not being yourself. And then you start to wonder, why didn't he hire a bass player who reads music, you know, write it out and have the guy play from a notation? And situations like that have never turned out well for me, you know. And I had an experience not too long ago of I was doing some bass for a singer, and I did a pass at it. He said it's too much information, so I did another pass, and he actually had a point. I think it was too much going on, so I simplified it,
Mm-hmm.
but was still trying to make it interesting, you know. But still, it's too much information. Didn't like the sound of the bass, the tone, so that was a complete failure. That the stuff was never used, so that was an example of the other extreme. And as I said on Mark's record, my first record was Who's His Drummer? I was imagining an octopus.
All these snare drums flying around all the time. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the point you just made. I mean, the two drummers blend so well. I thought it was one guy, you know, with more than two arms. You know, I couldn't figure it out. So anyway, that's pretty much how I approach it. And you know, with Mark, you know, there was a little bit of back and forth until we got it right. So it was a good result, I thought.
Indeed. Mark, in terms of this record, you have promoted yourself as a composer, producer, guitarist. But from what I've gathered, you treat and promote these facets as separate entities usually. But this is a culmination of everything together. So how did you approach this from that standpoint?
Yeah, I think with this album, it depends on the album I'm working on, and with this, it is very much kind of all intermingled. And I would say the same was true of Tales from the Dreaming City and some of the past ones I've done before that.
Yeah.
For me, I have when I write the pieces, I know what I want it to feel like. I kind of know what it means to me. It has most of the things I write are kind of about people's lives, places, times, real or imaginary. And I kind of know what that is and what it feels like at each piece. And so if that's happening in the session, I'm happy. If it doesn't happen and that's not happening for that piece, then I will intervene. And it just was never necessary in this session because everybody just seemed to intuitively get it. And it was just totally happening in the way I was really happy with. So yeah, my philosophy is, I mean, if you've got musicians of this caliber, you don't want to get in their way. You want to absolutely let them have freedom. And
Right.
only, you'll just get a much more rich and magic result if you let everybody be have that freedom. And so I would only step in if there was something that wasn't working as well, or if I suddenly had an idea and thought, okay, what about this? Let's try this, and then make a suggestion. But again, never push it. If it's not working, you don't want to, try something else. See where you can get it to flow rather than try to push something onto it. Yeah, so that's kind of my general approach. And in terms of producing, for me, I think one of the other things that, at least from my perspective, that allows some more freedom is that the compositions they're fairly strong in terms of the story that they tell, like the chords and the melody, they tell a definite story. So hopefully that's enough that people can get the idea of that, and then they can be free around that. And so it allows in some ways some more freedom because that bit's done, if you see what I mean. And can be interpreted in different ways, but hopefully still tells a similar story. It doesn't have to be exactly the same story. Everybody's going to hear it differently anyway. So
Correct.
if it's something that to me goes in roughly that direction and is working, as something that's pretty much fitting with what I had in mind, then I'm usually happy with it. But the other thing I wanted to add was just about the two drums. I remember with the two drums that coming into the session, and even when I was finishing off the material, coming up to like the weeks before the session, I in the back of my mind that like wouldn't it be amazing to have the Gary and Asaf playing together, two of the greatest drummers around, I think.
Yeah.
Play together, wow, that would be cool. But it was just kind of off in the back of my mind, and I didn't really have it as a definite thing. And then when we got in the session and we'd recorded quite a lot of the tracks, it became more and more like it has to happen. So I suggested, look, guys, we've got to do this, got to give this a try and see what happens with this. And I think the only direction I gave on that, I didn't want it to be a kind of trading of riffs kind of thing, two drum battle of the drums or anything like that. So I'm not that I'm saying that would have happened, but I just wanted to kind of make sure that it went in some other direction. And so what I said was, which I'm not sure if it had any effect or not, but I said, how about the idea of like sending smoke signals to each other, like motifs that go back and forth maybe, but not like trading riffs kind of thing. And then from my memory, what Asaf and Gary said was, they said, we're going to go off and talk conical.
Oh, nice.
So they disappeared for like half an hour, however long it was. And then they came back and just walked straight in and we started playing. So I don't know what happened in that conversation, but wherever it was, it resulted in what you hear.
Well, based on what you said,
I let Asaf do most of the talking. I was in the pub. No, kidding.
right. Based on what Mark said right now, it gets me thinking. First question that came to my mind was, you did speak about the aspect of conveying a narrative in each of these songs. And this being an entirely instrumental album, did you keep an audience in mind while making this album, firstly? And what did you want your audiences to interpret, in terms of these narratives for each song?
Yeah, I don't tend to think about what the audience is going to think. If only maybe from the perspective of thinking, is this good enough? I think I kind of feel that my audience expects a certain standard on every level of, playing, of like production, of everything else. And so if I feel something isn't up to that, then I would, work to improve that. But otherwise, yeah, no, I don't think about it. I feel if it works for me, if I feel like it's in a sense, in some way, my initial story has been rendered, then I'm happy. If I listen back and I get that same feeling or something similar to it as when I was composing it, then that's all I'm looking for. Because I just feel, I guess everybody's going to hear it differently.
Correct.
So there's no point in worrying exactly how somebody might interpret something, because it's just going to be so varied, that I kind of feel if it works for me, hopefully it will do something for other people.
Surely this music that you put out has several complex ideas, and with all these incredible musicians who are educated and play music at the highest level. And what I observed was you're playing around with abstract sounds in this particular record. So if I had to ask you at a very mundane level, right, what audience are you trying to target in terms of this record? Is this a very niche-centric audience? I'm still confused as to, who are these audiences who have these sensibilities to appreciate it in the best possible way?
Yeah, I don't know that I really know, except for the fact that I think anybody who is interested in music, for me, music is just the language of emotion. That's what it is.
Okay.
And different music can approach that in different ways. And the music that I tend to do and the musicians I play with tend to dig into that and explore it. There's a mood and emotion, and they explore that when they're playing and put their own interpretation on it and bring their own thing to that. And so it's a mixture of different explorations of different emotions within the kind of broader picture of the composition, which gives you a kind of a storyline, as it were. And each musician, as they're following the chord progression, if they're soloing, then they're telling their own story within that story, if you see what I mean. And to me, it's emotions, it's moods, it's imaginative stuff that you get from listening to that, if you're listening to it. And anybody that appreciates that kind of thing, that likes that level of sort of emotional experience, I think would hopefully enjoy it. And yeah, my experience is that if somebody, even if they're not super experienced at hearing this kind of music, if they're really kind of open, like emotionally, they tend to get it on some level. So yeah, I guess it's anybody really who likes that kind of thing.
Right. So I'd also like to hear everyone else's point of view. If I could slightly rephrase my question in a certain way, there is this whole idea of an acquired taste, right? You need to have certain sensibilities of appreciating certain musical forms to enjoy it to the most. I'm not talking from a musician standpoint, but from a listener standpoint. Would you like to throw some light, gentlemen?
I would like to say something, just to add or maybe rephrase what Mark was saying earlier. And I think that's something, that's an approach that I share with Mark, although we haven't really spoken about it literally in words, is that with the creation of an artist of any kind, at least that's the way I feel about it, there is a certain dichotomy, there's a certain thing that there's always a rub, because in one sense, the greatest service that you as an artist, and again, that's only my point of view, that the greatest service you can do for the listener who comes to listen or to see your creation is to not think about the spectator or about the listener, but to be 110% true to what you're trying to do.
Okay.
And and of course there is what like Mark was saying, there is this thing about, there is the quality of the presentation, which is really, really important for the audience. If I give you a composition that I like and I play to you, but it's all horribly recorded and not really rehearsed well, then you probably won't get what I'm trying to convey. But when we have a good recording studio and musicians such as these great guys here, and we have that quality already guaranteed, then from then it's really only trying to look in, and every one of us trying to really give a sense of trueness in the expression in the music, with funny enough, without thinking about the listener, thinking about what we want to tell and to tell it in the most honest way possible. And it's crazy because if you do that, and again, that's my approach, my feeling about it. If you do that, then the listener, whether he or she likes it or not, at least gets really what we are about. Okay. And the freedom in the music of that Mark is giving us is really allowing us to go through that process, basically, to not think about, oh, but would Mark like that? Oh, but would so-and-so like this or that? He's giving us the freedom, the opportunity to tell our story within, like he said, within the story of the music, of his music. Right. So, yeah, that's what I would like to add.
Okay.
It just occurred to me, we can often, maybe there are those artists around who consciously put something together with a definite idea of an audience in mind, or a definite direction for the music to take in order to be accepted by a certain audience. I just think, I know it sounds a little pretentious to make sort of abstract comparisons, but if you go to a country you've never been before, and you take your case and you leave it in the room and you just go out, and wherever that walk may take you, you're quite open to the idea that you will experience lots of different things, visually and emotionally, and in terms of what you feel and what you see, and the way the journey works out, which of course you don't know, and that was kind of always the experience that I enjoyed listening to music of any kind. Really, it's like, where is this going to take me? Where's it going to transport me to? And am I open enough, being the big question, to want to experience a journey of this kind? I mean, it's not a, it's not, I don't think it's an intellectual process. I think it's just of one of being open and being ready for an experience. And maybe audiences in general are not quite as they were in that regard these days. But I still feel that a lot of people are, and sometimes whether they know it or not, and the not knowingness is what appeals to me, and where a piece of musical product can take you out of the realities of what we're doing and just put your headphones on and go. I mean, that's the way it always was for me. I loved that. Okay. And I loved recordings that did that to me. And the added bonus was that every time I'd listen to that recording, it would take me to a different place anyway. So it's like an enriching but new process every time you hear something. And I think that's more along the lines of what artists in different genres feel, to present to people, to offer a chance for an experience, to open the door to a place that they don't know for a while. When you walk around there and then you come back and say, oh, okay, what's for dinner? That's my take, okay. Simple.
Mr. Jones?
Well, when I do gigs, you know, I see the punters that come to gigs, and I guess it's a certain demographic. But excuse me, when I'm working on some music, whether it's doing other people's music or my own stuff, I don't think at all about who the audience might be.
Yeah.
You know, as the other guys were saying, I mean, I agree. My own experience is I just do what feels good to me.
Hmm.
I'm sort of trying to use my own imagination and come up with stuff that creates some kind of picture in my mind. So I always work sort of from that perspective. And while doing it, I'm not thinking, well, who's going to like this stuff? I mean, I'm not absolutely not trying to target any demographic, you know, or section of an audience. So I just do it, and then you know, when the record comes out, I just hope that somebody out there likes it, you know, and the more people that like it, the better, you know. But you know, sometimes you do something and it'll get a completely negative result. Other times you do something and it gets really good acceptance, you know. And my experience is it's completely unpredictable. You might do some stuff and you think, wow, I think that was really good, and nobody likes it. And then you do something you think is, well, it's all right, it's a bit mediocre, and you know, get a great result. So it's a challenge, you know. It's unpredictable, but to sum it up, I mean, I do what feels good to me in the moment, you know,
Okay.
with whatever I'm working on.
All right. So Mark, based on what all of them said, I also would like to understand from you, in this scenario, in terms of the gathering, how do you address the challenge of maintaining musical integrity when experimenting with unconventional sounds and structures?
Okay, that's an interesting question. Can I add something first, just about to follow on
Yes,
from
please.
Percy,
Yes, please.
because it just sparked a thought to me, and that was that, at least for me, I don't know what the other guys think, but for me, with improvising, if you're improvising, certainly if you're soloing, but even if you're not soloing, you're just playing together as a group. If you get, at least for me, if I get self-conscious about it, I'm out of the flow. It's like, you know, I'm out of the room, you know, and you just have to kind of let go and get into the flow. And so the idea of thinking about, well, what will people be thinking about what I'm doing here? It's going to kill it right away. And so it's kind of, for me anyway, improvising, it only really happens if I've let go of all of that and I'm just in the flow. And so it kind of almost has, for me, it has to be that way. It has to be, don't think about what people are going to think, because, yeah. But over to what you were saying about the musical integrity of bringing together all these different sounds and things. That's an interesting question, I find, because like it could not work, couldn't it? Like if you had there's a lot of different stuff going on. It could be a disaster,
Right.
potentially. But so what makes it work? I don't really know. I mean, obviously this compositionally, it's strong. I worked hard on the composition, so I know I'm happy with that side of it. But as you point out, there's a lot of different sounds and things going on there that could cause issues. And sometimes that I sort that out in the mix. Sometimes there is clashes. There is like there's too much of this and too much of that sound-wise, and it's not really working. So I'll pull back on something. Or sometimes it's not enough. There's not enough, and I feel like with some of the pieces, it was kind of working for me as a composition, and everybody's playing was amazing, but it felt like production wise, it felt like there was something missing, that something about that imaginary place that I was looking for needed something else, some sonic element to it that wasn't happening. And so I would add some sonic elements to it on the keyboards or other sound effects and things like that. Occasionally that happened, but normally it's kind of built into how we played it. But yeah, I can't really answer your question except for the fact that for me, from my own perspective, it's just really intuitive. Like it just intuitively it needs this, or this seems to work for some reason. I don't know why. It just kind of seems to fit into the musical universe somehow. It seems to add to the musical landscape or the imaginary landscape, or it doesn't, if you see what I mean. I also I'll experiment sometimes if improvising and using kind of sound effects, and I try something and it doesn't work, well, I'm going to change it and try something else. And because it's not like with playing, you can immediately adjust as you go.
Yeah.
Or if you're using kind of some kind of sound effect or some kind of, you can't just change it instantly. You have to kind of consciously move it somewhere else. But yeah, sorry, I don't know if that's a great answer, but all I can really say is it's just an intuitive thing if it works or it doesn't work. And what makes it all hang together, to me, it's that same thing I was saying before. For me, there's a place I want the music to get to. There's something when I was composing it that I kind of saw and felt a kind of a view into some people's life experience, or a place that have people interacting in it, or somebody's life, imaginary usually for me, or something that's a series of things like that. And the piece, or sometimes it can be events, changing events, and whatever it is, there's a kind of arc, a kind of emotional arc of the composition, and an atmosphere I want to try to create. It's kind of something I experienced when I was composing, and I want to try to render that experience into music. And so I've done part of that with the composition, and the other part is hopefully going to happen when it's played. And so any kind of sonic unusual stuff would happen because for some reason it seems to support that.
In terms of the sonic landscape that you just mentioned, you took this decision of having 2 bass players and 2 drummers, right? For a reason. You must have sought a certain sound at the top of your mind, and you went ahead with these set of musicians. So if you could get a little more technical and help me understand, why did you do so?
Well, actually, that wasn't entirely my decision. The 2 drummers was with the bass players, Leonardo Pavkovic, who's the Moon June record label, and executive producer of this.
Right.
It was his idea to have 2 bass players, and he asked Tony Levin to play some tracks and Percy to play other tracks, and he suggested this to me, and I said, I'm sure it would be fantastic. I love both of those people's playing, absolutely amazing players. So, but that was actually his idea, to have those 2 different approaches. And so when he suggested that to me, I said, yeah, that could be really interesting. And I just listened to the tracks and thought about Percy and thought about Tony and thought, which one do I think would suit each one? And then there was some where I just thought, well, either one really. And so from what my memory anyway, I kind of gave some choice. I think I gave some choice to both of you, Percy and Tony, about, are you okay with doing these tracks? And I would have swapped them around if anybody wasn't happy with them. So yeah, that was Leonardo's idea. And I have to say, it's a big appreciation to Leonardo for putting this whole session together. I mean, it wouldn't have been him at all. And a huge thanks to Leonardo for that.
Right.
Yeah.
Where is he, by the way? He should be here with us today.
Yeah, we will have part 2 of this episode with the extended crew.
Oh, great. Good.
Great.
Let's do that.
That's great.
I wanted to understand now from the musicians, maybe Asaf and Gary first, as to what were some of the things Gary took over in terms of drums and Asaf alternated, and how did you like dabble together to achieve what was required?
So first of all, me and Gary, we played together at the same time live. So that was the approach. But I have to tell you that I've been listening to Gary both on the piano and on the drums for a long time. And for me, playing with Gary is not, I mean, the idea of playing two drums is kind of scary to me because, you know, usually as a drummer, you are the only one playing drums on stage, unless there is a, I don't know, a percussionist or a percussion ensemble or something like that, which really doesn't happen all that often. It's basically normally when a drummer plays with a band, it's 95% of the time it's just the one drummer plays that, you know, thing. So playing with another drummer is not something that I do that much. I know that Gary did it much more than me with Ranjit Barot in the concerts with John McLaughlin. But so that, I mean, I didn't really know what's going to happen, but it was much easier than I would think it would be. And of course, a lot of fun because I know Gary's playing for a long time and been enjoying listening to his work on the drums and on piano, of course. So for me, it was basically a no-brainer, you can say. So it's nothing that, I mean, yes, we had this little conversation about Conical and we were trying to do a few things. And I don't think we ever did any of those Conical compositions in the end. But I think
influenced by them.
Influenced by them, yeah, I guess so. But in that sense, it was mostly very intuitive, and I would say the conceptual part of it was really minimal or maybe even not there. It was just basically like we're doing now. It was like a conversation, you know.
Yeah.
And I have to say I really am very happy about what came out because it really sounds like one weird drummer, you know. And I love that because it sounds like, yeah, there are cymbals and drums and snare and bass drums there, like you would hear from a conventional drum kit.
Yeah.
But they are so weirdly placed in so many different ways that one drummer would never do. Because it's just too much to do. So I was really happy about the result, and I think I feel it's I'm very, you know, pleased with it, and I feel it's I would say quite unique in a way, you know, for two drummers to sound like that. Because from what I know from the few recordings that I've heard two drummers play, it would always be that drummer and that drummer. And it would be kind of, yeah, that's the two drummers. And I could hear what this drummer does and then what the other does in response or whatever. In this case, it was more like a one thing like that.
Okay.
Yeah. You know, it strikes me that I think the most successful of musicians in this realm anyway, who are involved in improvisational kinds of challenges, it's important that they be, I mean, whatever we reveal in terms of improvisation, that it really stems from us as people. And I think that if you're altruistic, meaning benevolent or kind or caring of what the other person feels or what the group feels this is going to work to your advantage, because you automatically go into this mode of not one single train of concentration, but manifold concentration. You know, I mean, there's a concentration where you're looking. I don't know. I'm not thinking about sound too much. I'm aware of myself inside what's happening, and this outer concentration and awareness of everything that's taking place all the time, and an awareness of how things are shaping with you in it, being the operative way of like explaining it. Really, I don't hear separate entities, and I think that's probably a good part of the secret of why it would be successful between two musicians, even if they happen to be musicians who play drums. I'll stick for that.
Okay.
But I think it comes from, you know, there are probably individuals I could think of that just would go in there and go, well, this is what I do, you know, and this is what you're going to have. And, you know, there's something, wow, you know, big statement being made there, but it's not ideal for a project such as this. And the way it was working out between Asaf and myself, I remember, kind of reminded me of things like, you know, when you go back to the Cream records, the live records, or even the studio records, and you hear Ginger's bass drum innately finding holes that Jack leaves. I mean, you go back and really listen to those records, you hear this organic machine of similar maybe to what you were saying, Percy, about thinking, oh, maybe that's one drummer, or it could be one drummer. They had it was like a soundscape of them, of this one voice, but the both of them contributing to it. So it's so important, the connection.
Okay.
I think that comes from the player, and it's down to the wisdom of Leo and pertinently you, Mark, to conceive that such a thing would be lending something very positive to the creation of what you wanted to hear. And I think that's an amazing. I mean, I think it's a really amazing achievement for you, this record, you know, in light of several aspects.
Mr. Jones, would you like to add as to how different was your approach, you know, when there were two different kinds of bass instruments, right? Your fretless bass, and I believe an upright bass. Was he using an upright bass?
No, it was all electric.
Electric. Okay, yeah. But how different was the approach? Because you had the same end goal at the end of the day, but what different did he do versus what you did? What did you learn from, you know, engaging with him?
Well, to come to think of it, I just realized I don't think I'd ever played with two drummers before. I worked a lot with percussionists, drummer and a percussionist, with Maurice Appert, especially in Brand X. So there was Maurice and Phil Collins, Maurice and Kenwood Denard, and then Mike Clark. And I mean, Maurice was a character, and he would sometimes play on the back of my head, which always kept me awake, you know. So that was a situation I was very familiar with, and I enjoyed that.
Okay.
So you have the challenge of finding a place within that combination of instruments. But as I said, two drummers was something actually quite new.
Yeah.
And as I said, I didn't realize at first that there were two drummers. I was hearing.
That's a compliment, man. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, I was hearing these two snare drums. I was like, wow. Anyway, I think Mark had sent me some chord charts. I can't remember, it was some time ago. So initially I had to kind of learn the tunes, you know, and I usually end up memorizing everything.
Okay.
So then it was a case of finding my place, and there's always a danger, speaking for myself, to get too wrapped up in my own
Yeah.
bass playing.
Mm.
And the danger there is that you can come up with something that is possibly too busy or it doesn't fit. So you always have to step back and sort of look at or listen to the big picture, you know,
Mm.
and try and be objective and figure out whether what you're doing is working within the structure of the thing.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, I'm trying to do that. I'm trying to come up with interesting bass parts without being distracting, you know.
Yeah.
Trying to get a good sound. Because for me, the tone of the instrument is a really big deal. And but I think you asked me what I thought the difference between what I was doing and what Tony Levin was doing. Right?
Correct.
Yeah, I mean, I can't speak for Tony, but I think we have very different styles,
Okay.
and that comes out in a record. He has a different sound. Maybe he approaches things differently. I don't know. I mean, you would have to ask him about that. But listening to the record, I thought that added to the overall quality of it. You know, there's two different styles of bass playing going on different tracks. Yeah.
Correct.
So I thought it was a good thing.
Okay. Speaking of the song Fleeting Glance, Mark, I hear a raga-based approach in the guitar solo. Was this a conscious attempt? If yes, could you throw some light on that?
Well, I'm a huge fan of Indian classical music. I have been for decades. I've got a huge collection of music, well, from around the world.
Right.
But particularly drawn to Indian classical music, and so I spend an awful lot of time listening to it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't play it in any formal sense, but just the influence is there, you know.
Correct.
So I think that just naturally kind of comes out. I hear it, and so I think, okay, go in that direction. And yeah, particularly the singers, and yeah, I think I'm drawn to singers and horn players more than I don't tend to listen to guitar players that much. It's mainly singers and horn players, and so there's a lot of amazing. It doesn't even describe it in terms of Indian classical music singers that, of course, I've spent a lot of time listening to, so it kind of like flows in. I think even when I'm not playing something that's obviously influenced, that kind of influence is still there in kind of how I play, probably.
Right. Since we are in the topic of Indian classical music, a lot of you have, dabbled with Indian classical music in your own respect. So I'd like to start with Asaf. So what inspired you to pursue the study of Konakol under the guidance of master percussionist Mr. Paramaswamy Kirupakaran at the Tamil Center in West London? And what were some of the techniques that has helped you build your awareness to a greater extent from the educational aspect of it?
Well, yeah, I mean, I got into South Indian music in my early 20s when I'm still living back in Israel. And a friend of mine, a drummer, got back from South India with this bunch of cassettes. Yeah, he got in the music shops over there. And the first thing I've ever heard is Tavil Nadaswaram. And you know probably what it is. For those of you who don't, Tavil Nadaswaram is Tavil is a percussion instrument and Nadaswaram is a double reed instrument, and this is a particular type of South Indian music which is played mainly in religious ceremonies, outdoor in temples, and also in weddings and so on. and I was just mesmerized by it, like big time. I heard all these cassettes. Sorry, there's a ice cream car here. Sorry. So I would hear all these cassettes for a really, really long time, and to the point where the cassette would kind of tear off and like could not listen to it anymore. And I was just mesmerized, and I understood nothing. This whole rhythmic thing that they do with the tawil player and in general in South Indian music just went completely over my head. But I was just absolutely mesmerized by the beauty and the intentional aspect of that rhythm. So, fast forward 10 years later, I went to live in London. So I was in London since 1998, 99. And as you probably know, there's a big South Indian community in London.
Correct.
And so it wasn't until 2007 or 8 where I actually started to realize that there's a lot of South Indian musicians who play tawil, who play mridangam, who play kanjira, and all this gatam and all these amazing instruments.
Yeah.
And so I, tried to get into that quote unquote scene a little bit. And that's when I met Paramaswamy Kirupakan, who was my teacher, who is, by the way, a disciple of Karakudi Mani, who you probably know.
Yes.
So I could say that I'm part of the Karakudi Mani lineage, or Bani, or school, if you want to say. So I started to study with him, and he really showed me, he was very kind with me, being a non-Indian musician who doesn't play any of those instruments. And so he showed me the conical, the vocal percussion system. And how did it help me? It basically changed my thinking of rhythm. It just turned it around in another way, because South Indian rhythm, but especially South Indian rhythm, in my opinion, is very much unlike anything other in any other tradition around the globe. It's a unique approach to rhythm that really, aside of the aesthetic beauty of it, there is something that mess up your brain, that, something about it that really restructure the way you think about rhythm.
Correct.
And I do play some classical music, like classical Carnatic music, with my teacher and with other percussion ensembles and other artists. Sometimes, very rarely, I usually play more like jazz stuff, but sometimes I do. But it's not so much about this. It's about what I could bring from that study, from that, looking into the DNA of rhythm, I would say, the DNA of rhythm, and just bringing some of that into other things that I do, which are not Carnatic music, which are more eclectic or jazz or rock or whatever, or my own music, whatever. So it really has changed my musical thinking in a very, very profound way.
Got it. In fact, a lot of musicians in this discussion have played with the musician Jeff Berlin. All right. So there seems to be some heated argument between Jeff Berlin and Victor Wooten on social media. So having been a musician who's played with him, some of you have played with him, I'd like to hear from you your viewpoints as to, what's going on. And was he an easy person to work with? What was it like when you all worked with him? So I want to hear from you firsthand.
So who starts?
I did something remotely for Jeff, but that's it.
Okay.
And I played with him at
okay. Yeah.
Well, I play quite a few times with Jeff, and I've done last year. We've done a whole month together, tour together with his band, his quartet. I mean, I love Jeff, and he does have very strong opinions about music, and especially about music education.
Okay.
So one of the things that he repeats, and it was really interesting, by the way, because during that tour in last April we did in Europe, mainly in Italy,
Yeah.
we did do a number of workshops together.
Okay.
So I would come, with a little snare and a hi-hat, and I'll play some brushes with him, and chip in whenever is necessary, and so on.
Okay.
And his approach is quite interesting. One of the things that he says, maybe in relationship to what you were asking, is that he doesn't like people to practice with a metronome. So he has very, very strong opinion about that.
Okay.
Personally, me, I do both. I sometimes practice with metronome and sometimes without, because it's just, this is the reality of, sometimes you have to play in a studio and you play with sequencers, or you play with a loop or a click track and so on. So you gotta have that in your back pocket, so to speak. But I think what he meant about that, and I think that's the challenge with Jeff sometimes, that his approach kind of gets lost in translation, if I can say that. So one of the things that he says, for instance, when you learn a tune, a piece of music,
Yeah.
one of the things that you can do, that's his suggestion, of course, is learn it without rhythm first and then add the rhythm to it. And there's a lot of sense in that. And actually, thinking about South Indian rhythm,
Yeah.
this is exactly the way that I've learned some of those korvas and moras and compositions that I've studied from Mr. Paramaswamy Kurupakaram. He would show me first without the rhythm. So he would show me the syllables, the how he would call it, the wording, the syllables first, so I can say the syllables and then put it in a rhythmic context. Okay. So in that sense, for the process of learning, for the process of education, there is definitely a place for that. I would think.
Anyone else would like to add?
Sorry, you're asking me?
Yeah, no, anyone else, if you have an opinion or if you would like to share your viewpoint.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Speaking of Jeff, I first met him in the, I think, 1980.
Okay.
When Bex and Rufus Band did a tour together in the UK, and I was probably one of the first guys to be on the receiving end of criticism, which is okay. But I didn't, speaking for myself, I didn't formally study music. I mean, I started playing bass when I was about 1961, 62.
Okay.
But then when I left school, I went and studied electronic engineering.
Yeah.
But still continued to play. So, I'm pretty much an autodidact, self-taught guy. Although along the way, I've tried to learn some theory, but I mean, my approach is, because of those limitations, I pretty much play by ear.
Okay.
And, I don't have a metronome, but I have a drum machine. And when I built my own drum machine back in the 70s, I used to play along with that. So
you built one? Did you say you built it?
It's a chip available at the time that they used in organs. Rhythm generated in organs. It replaced sambas and bossa novas, and so I used that chip. And then I had a counter, which you could set it to count any number of, say, snare drums, and then reset to the beginning of the bar, or you could count so many toms, and then reset. So it played time signatures. It would play 50 16, 7/8, 11/8. But a very cheesy sound. You know, there was no samples back then, so they were actually damped oscillators. So the kick drum would just be doom, you know, and the snare drum was an oscillator with a noise generator, sort of like, I mean, it kind of sounded terrible, but I used to practice with that all the time. So the idea of never using a metronome, personally, I just don't subscribe to that, but that's just me, you know. The way I was brought up in music, it's very different to probably Jeff. Victor Wooten, I've never met. So
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know Jeff or Victor, but obviously I know who they are, but I don't know them personally. I mean, personally, I practice with and without metronome. I do both. I find it both bring something very useful.
Okay.
But I would say, I think, I don't know if there's an overall best approach for everybody in terms of teaching or learning. I think people can be really different. I mean, I'm a good example of that. I'm dyslexic, so there was, I remember I grew up in Boston, although I live in the UK, and I got a British mum. I grew up in Boston in the US, and all my friends went to Berkeley School of Music, and so I kind of went by proxy, in a sense. They came home at the end of the day, and to be honest, I studied harder than they did. I just took everything they had and just looked at it and spent ages with it. But I realized by doing that I wasn't gonna learn the normal way.
Right.
I had to find another way. So it just like it would be so much memorization, so different from the way my brain worked, that I thought I could learn all this stuff, but I'm never going to be able to use it in real time. So I spent like a year just disassembling music theory down to the ground and rebuilding it back up in my own way, in a way that my brain works, and found another way of doing all of the same stuff, but in a way that my brain works. And of course, after doing that for a decade, you can look at that stuff and think, okay, it's the same thing. I can just swap over to that easily.
Sure.
But I could never have learned it that way. I had to learn it my own weird way, if you see what I mean, before I could, So I think it probably varies with some people. I mean, rhythmically, perhaps it's the same. It wasn't for me rhythmically. I learned it conventionally, but like harmonically, I had to do it a different way. And maybe for some people rhythmically, there's some ways that will work better than others. I don't know. But I do think that probably different people will learn differently. And applying one like best method probably isn't going to work best for everybody.
Makes sense. Makes sense. In the interest of time, I have one last question for today. Down in the distant horizon, what would you be like to be remembered as?
I can't remember.
But you might have something, some idea, right? Like you'd like to be remembered for something, or something of that sort.
I don't know, a trier.
Hopefully something, maybe, hopefully I can provide some experiences for people that they can get some emotional journey from. I hope I was generous musically, not just with the musicians, but also in terms of what I try to give.
I remember you being generous. You are. You are.
Mr. Jones?
Yeah, I'll tell you, everything we're covering really just it's like the sort of analytical equivalent of what's going on the record. It's really amazing. When you speak to people you've worked with and musicians that you feel an ease to play with, it's just the same as people.
Okay.
Yeah. I I think it was something you were saying before. Percy, you're up there now. About criticism,
Right.
and maybe in comparison to this sort of for or against the idea of practicing to a metronome or not, would be to shine light on the kind of resistance you can get as somebody starting out in music, and how that might affect your aspirations or in a less desirable way. I think growing up when I did, it was a matter of kind of holding your own ground. I mean, people didn't mince their words back then. Um, and from one musician to another too, I came through like a big band discipline
Yeah.
with a very kind of uh, heavy disciplinarian band leader,
Okay.
and a very clear and exact idea of what he wanted from drums, and I had to find a way to deliver that. And if I didn't, I was yelled at best.
Okay.
But there were other drummers around. One of which was I looked upon as a kind of god of the in the front line of experimental drummers in this country.
Okay.
And I met him one day while playing something that was, I think it was like a sort of festival or a combination event
Yeah.
where a couple of different people played. And he came up to me and said, "Well, you'll never play as long as you've got a hole in your ass." Basically, no exaggeration.
Okay.
And it was like, wow, So I think if you can really, I think if there's a value to that experience, I think it's in the sense of recovery and what you do with it and how you deal with that, and your ways of it could have been that he was having a bad day, or it just could have been that he didn't particularly have very high regard for himself, which I would find very hard to believe, or whether he's just kind of got his thrills being a little provocative and as many from the north of England were at that time. Anyway, but I think it's important to sort of accept these experiences and have them benefit you, and if they can benefit you in a positive way, obviously, it's of great value. I mean, I saw it on a variety of different platforms. I came up through classical piano, and I had a real dragon of a piano teacher, and she used to sort of get off on being brutal and trying to intimidate you, and get off on those kind of things, violence even.
Oh no.
So I mean, you live through that, and you sort of start to begin on the ladder of getting a sense of or forming a sense of what you're really about based on what you love and what you're prepared to fight back about. On people that would rather see you sort of not where you are and necessarily. Hey, it happens. But I think it's not an easy road with music, but it sure can be beneficial. I think if you know how to, if you get a better handle on how to deal with these kind of experiences, and I don't really know where I was going with that. I think somebody spoke about, we were talking about Jeff, right?
Correct.
He can be a little prickly. I've seen him, online, and I think, oh, okay, so he's going to unruffle some feathers by saying that, and that in combination with his manner, a little bit abrupt. But I know he's coming from a good place, and I know he comes from a great place in musical standing.
Okay.
Maybe it's the New York bit coming out, But I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think it's if anything, I would rather try to get a positive feeling from it, and I would say that it was um, character forming. Till we say that, to actually have these kind of hardships on a personal level, but everything contributing to the music. I think this is the line we've been on ever since we started this conversation today. It's everything we can bring to it, everything we've lived through, everything we could see in a particular situation, insofar as a way to go, and everything we can work as a union with and with our fellow musicians.
Beautiful. On that note, Asaf and Mr. Jones, I'd like to know, what would you like to be remembered as in the near future? You know?
What is it?
Well, just to sort of carry on with Gary's point, I remember I went to school in Wales, and music was part of the curriculum, you know.
Okay.
I remember my music teacher telling me that I should take Russian.
Take what?
So
He said
suggested
what?
that I should take Russian, not music.
What studied Russian, the language?
Yeah, instead of
Wow.
music.
Oh,
So that was the first kind of knock I got, and then subsequently, you know, seeing comments like your intonation is off, you can't count, your bass is set up all wrong. I mean, it was a whole lot of stuff, you know. So, and it knocks your confidence, especially when you get negative comments from, you know, someone whose ability you respect, you know. So you just have to, you know, as Gary was saying, you just have to keep going and, you know, try and rebuild your confidence and keep at it. But it's you know, it's kind of negative when that stuff goes on, you know, musicians criticizing other musicians, and they're doing it publicly online, and I mean, you know,
Yes.
I don't subscribe to that.
okay.
In terms of being remembered, I think I'd like to be remembered as, oh, that guy did some cool bass playing on whatever records, you know, and remembered as a good person, someone who didn't screw anybody over, or, you know, conducted life in a righteous way. That's pretty much it, I think.
Amazing. Asaf?
Can I just ask,
Yeah,
Percy,
please,
did you
Yeah.
play on Nova? It
Yes,
was
I
you,
did.
right? With Narada
Wonderful.
Mark Golden. I loved what you did, how you played together on that, man. Wow. That's a
Well,
long, very old record.
that band had some issue with their rhythm section. They were Italian,
Yeah.
and they hired me and Narada to play on the record, which we did at Trident. So we just went in and learned the stuff and recorded in the studio.
Loved
So-
that.
Thanks.
Nice.
Oh, it was wonderful. I used to listen to that record over and over again.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah, it came out good, as it turned
Yeah.
out.
yeah.
Thanks for the kudos.
Asaf, would you like to go ahead?
I could continue, but no, right.
Just to say another thing about that whole thing, you know, we're talking about Jeff Berlin and about the criticism thing and everything. I always like to remind myself
Uh-huh.
that, you know, a lot of people in the quote unquote business of music are, for lack of a better term, challenged human beings.
Mhm.
And, you know, what that means is that basically, and I think, I know I can only speak for myself, but I know that a lot of us are here now talking about music and making music because of that.
Right.
Because there is a sense of challenge because there is a divergent thing about people who are artists, not only in music, but in any arts, I think. And I think that is why people that are going into arts in the first place, because they are allowed to express something that otherwise in the typical world is very difficult to do. And we all know this, each one of us, I'm sure along our career, worked with some, excuse my word, fucked up people, but like really fucked up. And we all know that. But what I'm trying to say is that this challenge that a lot of people who are in the arts have is also why we can express things that are, more emotionally deep, you can say, for lack of, I don't really know how to say this, but they can go to places in their heart, in their mind, where other people were, let's say, more typical, you can say, don't go that often there. But the problem is that it comes with a cost. It's a package deal. So some of us deal with it better than others. So there are some people who can contain that sensitivity. They can contain that thing, and they find a way to negotiate with reality so they can still live and operate in the world. And some of us didn't, and we all know the one who didn't do it so well and the one who did, So when I see people who are like this, there's always, I always try to ask myself, why are they doing what they're doing? And what is, to try to see, what the words are pointing. Words are, they're like signposts. You try to look beyond them, what they're saying. What does this mean? And so that is quite a common occurrence in the arts world, I think, in my opinion, and from my experience. So that's just wanted to chip into the conversation in that sense. So so what I would like to be remembered for, I don't know, just being a drummer and a composer.
Okay.
Short answer.
One thing that really caught my attention was in terms of the whole idea of integrating the physiological aspects of rhythm, melody, and harmony into some of the compositions in the album The Gathering. What approaches did you all take individually as instrumentalists?
I can talk to that if you like.
Sure.
Well, I mean, I'll just talk a tiny bit about the compositional side of it, even though, like, you asked about the instrumentalist part, but I'll get onto that in a second. In terms of harmony, for me, and I guess to some degree, it's the same when I'm playing my instrument as composing.
Yeah.
It's every chord, say, has a particular meaning to me in the context of the other chords on its own, and also in context of the other chords. And every note in each chord has a context to the next note of the next chord. So that's kind of how I see it. Every note moves to the next chord and for a reason. And that reason is to do with the flow of the kind of musical, emotional thing that I'm kind of hearing.
Okay.
And then there can be an element of puzzle to it as well. Like sometimes, you're writing a piece and I'm taking that approach, and then you get a situation where you think, well, I need this to kind of resolve, or I want this chord progression to be able to start again and sound like it makes sense. And then you can have a real puzzle of how can I get this to work. And have that emotional flow without just, oh, I'm going to stick in an obvious cadence here, and that could just destroy the whole feeling of it. You got to find something that does that while keeping all. See, there can be an element of kind of puzzle to it, but in general, to me, it's that kind of flow, and it's similar when I'm playing. But when I'm playing and if I'm composing something, the way I compose for this kind of setting, there's not much rhythm involved in it. If I'm composing for like classical instruments, there will be, but if I'm composing for a band like this, all of that's not there. That's up to the musicians to do. For the most part, might have a sequencer thing in it, but if I do, it's going to just be straight ahead, usually. So, but when playing, obviously, half of it's rhythm. So for me, I can't separate it out. I can't separate out the harmonic melodic part from the rhythmic part very easily. When I'm playing, it's all part of the same thing. If I'm playing a musical statement, it always has a rhythmic element. It always has a melodic element, usually. Maybe it could have a rhythmic element without a melodic element, maybe. But for the guitar, it generally has both. So from the melodic element, I mean, I just hear it as I'll hear a musical phrase based on the feeling of what the music presents to me at that moment, and I play what I hear or attempt to play what I hear. And I follow the flow of the moment of the music and just let it try to come through me. Is how I approach all of that, and rhythm is the rhythmic part of that is, so the harmonic part of that is what I hear. I'll hear the notes, I'll hear the feeling, and I'll know what notes kind of create that feeling, if you see what I mean. And I know my instrument well enough that I can know where that's going to be, if you see what I mean. And with the rhythmic element, it's like how can I explain that? It's an energy potential. Maybe it's what I was describing it. There's this energy potential there, and it can pull and push and jump and do everything really. And it's just the underlying kind of driving kind of energy, propulsion and kind of substrate, I guess you could say, of the whole thing is the rhythm for me.
Right.
I agree.
Well, I try and if I can jump in, I try and whether it's my own stuff or I'm playing on somebody else's stuff, is to give the piece of music a shape, a sort of harmonic shape, so that it goes through some changes and then resolves. Sometimes it doesn't resolve properly. It sort of just hangs in one place, and which gives some tension, and also dynamically a shape to the dynamics. So so that the piece of music has a curve and is kind of telling a story, an emotional thing going on. You're trying to get things going in someone's imagination. So quite often I'll sit down, and before I've tracked anything, I'll sit down and listen to it several times. And I start sort of hearing stuff in my head, potentially, lines in my head that might work, and then I'll sit down and start applying them, and see how it all shakes out. So for me, I'm always looking for a shape at the end.
Yeah.
If I can chip in a little bit here, you mentioned the word physical, and I think it's very apt in my case, at least. Of course for Gary as well, because the rhythmic element and the drums, they're quite a physical instrument.
Correct.
And there is definitely a pronounced physical element in playing the instrument and playing rhythm as well, you know. So it is interesting that you've asked that question, because it kind of threw me back to the session when we played. And I remember thinking in that, you know, particular session, what if I just let go of everything? I just, you know, like you really let go of all your muscles, like, as if they have a life of their own. That's what I was thinking during the session. What happens if, you know, if I just let go? And that's what I was trying to do. And I think it is interesting when I hear back some of the stuff that we've done during the session, how the drums, when I was in that state, you could say, how the drums kind of go up and down, and they're not they're kind of not really that regular. And I think in a way I liked that sound because I think it fits the music. It's sort of almost like a rhythm without the backbone of a snare and a bass drum in a particular place that you would expect from a drummer to do. But again, this is all really possible because Mark's music and Mark's approach has that freedom in it, and it allows me to experiment with those more radical, you can say, approaches. So yeah, it was, for me, it was that question in my mind, or what if I just let go of everything and I just let my hand do the thing, and I'm on holiday, you know, I'm not there, you know, the hands, they're just doing what they need to do. And so that was personally, that was my approach for that music.
We definitely need to do part 2 of this series. We will regroup very shortly. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for tuning in. It's been such an incredible blessing, honor, and a privilege having you distinct musicians from different parts of the world come and participate and be a part of Stalwarts of Music.
Thanks so much to you, Aditya, for asking us to come.
Aditya.
It's been a great pleasure.
And a huge thanks to you, Mark, again for inviting us to the party. That was
and thanks you guys for playing what you played.
I can't wait to hear the final mix and everything finished. Been waiting a long time for it.
Yeah, thank you very much, everyone. So